Hi, I'm Paolo Pialorsi, and in this video I'm going to share with you how you can build a bot-powered adaptive card extension for Microsoft Viva Connections. The bot-powered ACEs are a new technology recently introduced by Microsoft, and being a new technology, it might be that it will slightly change in the future. As such, you should keep into account that the articles associated with these videos will be kept up to date, while the videos might not be updated as often. Now move to the demo environment and let's see how we can build from scratch a new bot-powered ACE. In this demo, we are going to create an adaptive card extension for Microsoft Viva Connection to collect user feedback. So this is the UI of the ACE in the Viva Connection dashboard, and the user will have a text box where they can write their feedback, like for example, this is my feedback, and they can click on the submit button to see that the feedback has been submitted. They can also click on the card and see a quick view with a nice message to inform them about the functionality of this adaptive card extension. How can we build that? Well, first of all, if you want to build a bot-powered adaptive card extension with Microsoft.NET, you will have to install the Bot Framework v4 SDK template for Visual Studio in your development environment. And once you have done that, you can start Visual Studio, create a new project, and by filtering the project type by category AI bots, you will be able to see that you can create a bunch of different flavors of bot projects, including the empty bot one. Choose the empty bot and click on Next. Provide a name for your bot project and a target folder. And then the scaffolding will start, and you will have a new Visual Studio project where there is a startup.cs file which defines the initial plumbing from a dependency injection point of view. You will have an empty bot.cs, which will be the actual bot you will have to implement for your bot-powered ACE solution. And there will also be an appsetting.json file with some placeholders for some settings that we need to create based on a bot registered in Azure. Then in the dependencies, this project will have a dependency on the Microsoft.bot.builder integration ASP.NET Core. Well, we need to update this package to the latest release. So we click on Manage NuGet Packages. We select the package that I just told you, and we upgrade it to the version at least 4.21.2, which includes new functionalities about the bot-powered ACEs for Microsoft Viva Connection. So click on the Update button and the solution will be updated. You have to apply all of the actions and to accept all of the licenses, and then you are done with the updated release of the library. Now it is time to register a new bot in Azure. So switch to the Azure portal, and from there click to create a new resource. The resource will be an Azure bot resource. Azure bot resource. And by filtering by name, you will be able to find the Create Azure Bot option. And by doing that, you will have to provide, first of all, a bot handle, which is a name which will uniquely identify your bot, and it is an immutable name. So once you choose it, you will not be able to change it anymore, while the display name of the bot will be updatable in the future. You have to, of course, select a target subscription and a target resource group, as well as a data residency policy. You have to choose a pricing tier for your bot. Right now, I'm creating a solution for development and testing purposes, so I will go for the free one. But when you will go in production, you will have to select the standard one for have a better availability of your solution. And then you have to choose the type of Microsoft application that will be created for your bot. You can choose between user assigned managed identity, which targets solutions where your bot will be hosted on Azure in a single tenant on a service which supports the managed identities. Or you can choose single tenant if you are still targeting a single tenant, but you are planning to host the solution in an environment or in a service which is not able to support managed identities. Or you can choose multi-tenant if you want to create a multi-tenant solution, which will be my choice right now. Then you can also choose if you want to create a new application or if you want to use an existing one. And I'm going to create a new one. Click on Review and Create. And once you are done with the review, click on the Create button. As soon as the Azure resource will be registered and properly created, you will be able to go to the resource page and do the additional configuration steps for your service. So click on Go to Resource. And here we have the configuration settings for the Azure bot that we have just registered. If you click on the configuration panel, you will be able to configure a bunch of settings for your bot. So first of all, and the most important setting you need to configure is the messaging endpoint URL, which has to be a URL of your service, of your REST API, which will be listening for the /API/messages relative endpoint under the endpoint of your bot service. If you are planning to run the bot locally in a debug and development environment, you should use a reverse proxy tool, like for example ngrok or many more that are available on the market. So here I'm using ngrok, and this will be the URL of my reverse proxy to run my bot locally. So provide the URL and click on the Apply button to save the settings. Once you have done that, you have to configure some additional settings for your Azure application. So click on Manage Password and you will be brought to the settings of the Azure application registered in Entra ID for you. First of all, you need to create a client secret for the application. So click on New Client Secret, provide the name for the client secret, which of course is client secret because I'm a developer and I don't have any kind of fantasy. And that's okay to keep it alive for 6 months. Click on Add, and then you will have to store in a safe place the value, the actual value of the shared secret. Then move to the Overview panel, and from there also copy in a safe place the client ID and the tenant ID of your application in Entra ID, so that you will have all of these values available when you will need to configure the bot in Visual Studio and then in the actual deployment. Once you have done that, you have to accomplish some additional steps, like for example, you have to go to the authentication section and you have to configure a new authentication platform, which will be a web platform, and in there you will have to configure as the redirect URI for your application, again the same URL as before, followed by /authend. This will be the URL to close the authentication flow. You should also enable the implicit grant and hybrid flow by enabling this kind of tokens for your application and click on the Configure button. Once you have done that, you can switch to the API permission panel and click on the Add a permission. Choose the Microsoft Graph delegated permissions and choose the basic OpenID permissions, which will be used for authentication purposes, as well as user.read to being able to read information about the currently authenticated user. Once you've done that, click on Add Permissions, and once the list of permissions will be defined, grant them for your tenant. So now we have configured the application. We still need to accomplish one last and final step, which is the step of adding a new permission scope. So you go under Expose an API, and first of all, you have to register a unique URI for your application. So here under Application ID URI, you click on Add, and you configure a specific URI, which will be API, followed by the name of the host where you're hosting your solution, / the unique ID, the client ID of your application. This has to be this value if you want to have support in Microsoft Teams for your bot. So click on Save, and you are done. And then you need to add a custom scope to your application. Copy the URI in a safe place as well, and then click on the Add a Scope button. You will have to provide a name for your scope, which has to be access_as_user in order to be properly configured again to be a bot for Teams. Choose admin and user consent because you want to be able to consent this permission both for admins and users, and start providing a set of descriptions for the admin UI as well as for the end user UI. These are sample values that you can use to properly configure the scope. enable the scope if it is not enabled, and add the scope to your application in Enter ID. Last but not least, you have to pre-authorize all of the applications of Teams, meaning the desktop, mobile, and web application. In order to do that, you have to click on the Add a Client Application in this interface. You have to provide the client ID of the target application. This one is the one of the Teams mobile and desktop app, and you have to authorize the scope that you just defined. And you should do the same also for the Teams web application. So let me click again on Add a Client App. Let me provide the client ID of the Teams web app this time, and still let me authorize the scope that we created before. These GUIDs, these client IDs for the Teams mobile, desktop, and web application are documented in the article associated with this video. So now the application is fully configured. We can go back to the configuration of the bot itself, and we can click on the Channels panel. From here, we need to configure the Microsoft 365 channel. We should read all of the description to be aware of what we are going to do, and then we can click on the Apply button to add this channel to the target Azure bot. And once we are done, we click on the Close button, and we can see that the Microsoft 365 channel is healthy and configured for our Azure bot. So, we are now ready to go back to our Visual Studio project and to configure the settings of the application that we just registered in Azure. So, first of all, the application type. As we said before, it will be a multi-tenant application. Then we need to configure the client ID of the application right here. We have to configure the secret of the application in the app password setting. And we have to specify the ID of the tenant in the Microsoft App Tenant ID. These settings should be, in my opinion, stored in the user secrets file. So let me show you. If you have user secrets enabled in your Visual Studio, you should store the secret values there, and you should keep just the placeholders in the default app settings file for better security of your solution. Okay? So let's save the secrets, let's save the app settings, and now let's start building the actual bot. Let me open the empty bot file, and the first thing I would do is to rename the file so that it will not be anymore an empty bot, but it will be the collect feedback bot. And we rename all of the references to the file. Then we need to replace the base type from activity handler to SharePoint activity handler, which is a new type introduced in this version of the bot SDK 4.21.2. Now we can get rid of this override of this method, and we can actually see that we have a bunch of overrideable methods related to the bot powered ACEs. So if we do override and we write SharePoint, we can see that we have 5 different overrideable methods. One to get a card view asynchronously, one to get a quick view asynchronously, one to get the property pane to configure the bot-powered adaptive card extension, one more to save the settings configured by the user in the property pane, and one last method which will allow us to handle any custom action whenever the user will interact with the UI of the bot-powered ACE in the Viva Connections Dashboard. So, we will dig into all of these methods in this video and in some of the upcoming videos related to this series of videos, but right now we simply want to create a bot that will show a card view to collect feedback and eventually a quick view to give additional information. So, we are going to be fully focused on the SharePoint task get card view and quick view, as well as on the handle action. So let me get rid of the other 2 methods. Now, whenever you create a bot-powered ACE, it is a common habit to have in the code base of your bot a unique ID which will identify the adaptive card extension, which will be a GUID to string. This value will be used later on, storing some information about the card views that we are going to create. And as you can see, whenever we want to render a card view, there will be an action here, which is the on SharePoint task get card view async, which will return a card view response, while whenever we want to render a quick view, we will have a quick view response. Now, again, it is a common behavior when you develop a bot power ACE to have a constructor, and inside the constructor, where you can eventually also rely on dependency injection, you can build and pre-configure all of the card view responses and quick view responses that you plan to use in your ACE implementation. So, first of all, I want to rely on some configuration settings. So let me add at the top of my bot the iConfiguration object that I'm going to use to manage the settings. And using dependency injection, I'm going to retrieve that one in the constructor, and then I will rely on the base constructor for my activity handler. So here I can say that I want to store in the underscore configuration property the actual configuration that I've got. But I also want to have a dictionary in my implementation which will hold all of the pre-configured card views. So I'm creating a concurrent dictionary with a key of type string and a card view response type for the object contained by the dictionary, and this will be used to store all of the card views that I'm going to use in my custom implementation. Every card view and every quick view will have a unique ID to be identifiable in the implementation, and that's why I'm going to define some static strings for these unique IDs. There will be the get feedback card view for the very first card, the OK feedback to provide the result of the collected feedback, and the quick view to show the instructions to the user. So now we are ready to start playing with the card view and the quick views generation. So first of all, every single time we create a card view, we need to configure an ACE data property, which is an object, a complex type, defined in the bot framework SDK. And the ACE data object will hold information about the title, the size of the card, the version, and the ID that we created before. And every card view that we are going to create will have to have the ACE data properly configured accordingly to these settings. So let's create, for example, the card view that I want to use to collect the feedback from the user. We need to create a new object of type card view response. That object will have to be configured with the ACE data that I just defined. We need to have a card view parameters property for the card view response. And inside this one, we can use a factory object which provides us a bunch of methods which will create different flavors of card views. Here you can see we have the sign-in card view parameter, the primary text, the basic card view, the search, the text, input, and so on and so forth. The one we are going to create right now is a card view to collect the input of a user. So it will be a text input card view. And the parameters for a text input card view are those that define the card bars, or the very top area of the card view, the header, the body, and eventually a list of buttons and an image for the card view. For the sake of simplicity, let me copy and paste the definition of this item so that we can speed up the development process. So here I'm going to provide the following settings for my card view parameters. First of all, we will have a card bar component for the top bar. Then we will have a text box component to have the collection of the feedback, and this will be the label. Now here we have the text input component to collect the actual feedback value, and then we have a button which will be the submit button to get the action on the server side to collect the feedback. And last but not least, we can have an image to show on the right side of the UI. Remember that in the UI of our card view, we have this image, we have the text box, this is the bar, this is the text component, this is the input component, this is the command, and this is the image. Okay? Just for the sake of having a proper implementation of my solution, I also have a base URL property that I want to configure, and let me store it right here, and that I want to retrieve in the constructor of my adaptive card extension in the bot implementation from the configuration of my project. It will be a base URL property. So right here I have configured my card view response for the initial card view. Now, once I've done that, I need to configure the unique ID of my card view response. So here I am, and let me do that using the static variable that I showed you before. And if I want to be able to support the click on the card in order to show the quick view, I can also add the implementation of the on-card selection event, which will be a quick view action, which will show the quick view with the ID feedback quick view ID, which we are going to create in the upcoming meeting. Now, we can add the new card that I just created to the dictionary of card views that I want to use. Now, let's move on. We want to do the same for the feedback collected card view. So, let me simply copy and paste additional code that I will explain you. And as such, here, right after the initial card view, I want to create another one, which will be of type image card view. So I'm going to use the image card view parameters. I'm using the same ACE data, and I'm configuring all of the components for my component-based card view, including an image which will show the OK to the user to say that the feedback has been collected. And again, I configure the unique ID, and I configure an action on click to show the quick view. And then I add it to the concurrent dictionary that I have in my implementation. So, now that we have done that, we are ready to handle the click on the submit button. So, whenever the user will provide a feedback right here and we click on the submit button, we want to handle that feedback. So, we can switch to the on SharePoint task handle activity async method override. And here, instead of using the base implementation, we can replace it with a custom one. First of all, we should check if the user cancelled the request, and if not, we can start processing the action. Well, the action information will be provided inside the ACE request input argument that we get inside this method. And in there, we find a .data property, which is of type JObject, and in that one, we can find a bunch of information about the action that has been triggered. So, for example, if we look back at the feedback card, we can see that the card did have a card button component with an ID with the name send feedback, and right now, in the code where we want to handle the feedback, we should check through the action parameters object if we have got exactly a request or an action for the click on that button. So we can do something like that. We can say if action parameters type is of type submit, so a submit button, and the ID of the button is the one we are looking for to collect the feedback, then here we should write the logic to collect the actual feedback. Where do we find the feedback? Well, the feedback will be still available in the action parameters object. So, whenever we process a task handle action, we need to reply with a base handle action response, which will be made of a card view response or a quick view response. In my scenario, when the user will click on the button, I want to show another card view to say that the feedback was collected. So this is what I'm going to do in this scenario. I'm going to create a card view handle response, action response. I'm going to get from the action parameters the view where I want to navigate to and the feedback value. This feedback value represents, again and one more time, the ID of the text input that I have in the feedback card. So I'm simply reading by ID all of the settings in the card submitted by the user. Then I get from the dictionary of card views the next card view where I want to navigate to, which is the one with the OK. And so I generate a new text for that one based on the feedback of the user and on the date time of the feedback collection. And then I say in the response object that the render argument will be my next card, meaning that the adaptive card extension will render this new card properly configured with the feedback of the user. I can also say that if in the OK card, the user will click the OK button, I want to handle that scenario as well. So I can say, for example, that if instead of having a submit for send feedback, I have a submit for OK button, what I want to do is to still create a card view handle action response, but now I want to go back to the original card to collect a new feedback. And in fact, here in the OK button, I say that in the submit action, the view to navigate to is the collect feedback one. So I want to go back to the home card view, basically. And by doing that, I will be ready to process my request. And then I can simply say that in any other scenario, I will simply do a no hope. Okay? So this is how I can handle the action, the interaction with the user. Last but not least, we said that we want to have a quick view to show instructions to the user. So let's do that. But first of all, let's configure the card view to render as the first one, the collect feedback card view to render as the first one in our solution. As such, we are going to say that in the on SharePoint task get card view async, by default, we want to provide the card view to collect the feedback. While in the on SharePoint task get quick view async, we are going to create a new quick view response object. The quick view response object is an object which will provide the actual content of a quick view, which is something based on an adaptive card definition. You can define an adaptive card either using a bunch of JSON and the adaptive card templating NuGet package, or you can define it in code in a declarative way, which is what I'm going to do. So first of all, I'm going to define the title and the adaptive card template for my output, which will be an adaptive card of version 1.5. And then I can create a container, which I will use to contain all of the actual elements of my adaptive card. So, for example, I can say that the container will be with a separator, and I can say that I want to add into that container an adaptive text block, which will represent the title text in the card view, and I'm going to add that text item to the container items. And then I can do the same for the additional text block, which provides detailed instruction to the user. So again, I created another adaptive text block with a different configuration, and I still add it to the items of my container. Once I'm done with that, I can simply add the container to the body of my template, so to the body of my adaptive card. I can configure the ID of the quick view, and I can return the quick view as the result of my method. Now, in order to complete the implementation of my solution, I want to add to the www.root section of my bot application a folder that you can find on the assets related to this video and article, which will include the few media items, so the images that I'm going to show in the UI of the bot. So, for example, this feedback image as well as the OK image in the OK card. And by doing that, I'm going to add an existing item. Actually, I'm going to create a folder called media, and in this one, I'm going to add a bunch of existing items which are available in this folder of my machine. So the collect feedback and the OK feedback. And now that we are ready with the whole implementation, we simply need to add additional settings to deploy the solution in the target environment. So we need to create a new folder in the solution, which we can call, for example, Teams App Manifest. and inside this folder we need to add some files again existing and available in the assets of this article and of this video. So let me again go to the same asset folder, and here we can add 2 icons and a manifest.json file. The 2 icons will simply be icons that we need to use to properly configure a Microsoft 365 application. And here you can see the manifest for the Microsoft 365 application. In this manifest, we have to configure as the app client ID, as well as in all of these sections where we have app client ID, the unique ID of the both app that we registered before. So actually this value. And let me do that right now. So here, as well as here, here, and right here. What we have in this manifest file is the configuration of a new bot-powered ACE application for Microsoft 365, where you should also provide a description for your company, your website, your partner ID, and so on and so forth. As well as you should also consider that you have the bot section where the actual bot is configured by app ID, as well as in the dashboard card section, which is a new one, you can see the configuration of your bot-powered ACE, and in this scenario it is the bot-powered ACE to collect the user feedback. And as you can see, this one is referring to the bot which is configured up here. Last but not least, you have to configure as the valid domain the domain that you are going to use to host your solution with your reverse proxy. So in my scenario, in my sample, it will be feedback-bot.powered.ngrok.io. So once you have done that, and once you have properly configured the developer section, let me do that just with fake values, fake developer and fake website, https fake.com, same here and same here, and eventually with a partner ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or whatever else. Once you are done with that, you can open the folder where you have this file. So right click, open folder in File Explorer, and from here you can select all of the files and create a zip file which will be the application package that you are going to deploy. Let me call it, for example, feedback ACE as the name of my package, and let me call the zip file exactly the same way. So let me go here and let me create a zip file which will be called like this. Now we can switch to the app catalog of our target tenant, so in the Manage App section of SharePoint Online in our tenant, and we can simply drag and drop the package onto the target app catalog. By doing that, we will be able to install the application in the target tenant, and as you can see, we have to enable this application to all of the sites. Let's do that. And it's done. So now we can click on close. We can start ngrok in order to listen for the host header localhost for our target host name. So let's do that. And we can now start the Visual Studio project. Remember to configure the base URL in the app settings as well as in the eventually secret JSON, or you can even keep this value in the app setting JSON because it's not a secret one. So let me start this application, and eventually let me set a breakpoint right here, for example, in the on get card view async, so that you will see that our Visual Studio project will be triggered. So let me go to the Viva Connection Dashboard. Let me click on Edit, and I'm going to add a new card. Let's search for Collect. And here we can see that we have the Collect Feedback Demo 1, which is the one that I just configured. Let me click on it, and as we can see, we are now in Visual Studio. Let me press F5, and let me remove this breakpoint for the sake of having a better UI, but this is the Adaptive Card Extension bot-powered one that we just created following these steps.